Hey, how's it going? It's Dan from modular.dev. Today we're going to go over some new features in C# 9. We went over records and init-only setters last time. And today we're going to go over the top-level statements, pattern matching enhancements, targeted type new expressions, and targeted type conditional expressions. The rest of them are, these three here are for more low level, so that's probably a more niche market. If you want me to do a video on those, I can, although I'm not that familiar with that type of programming, but I can definitely give it a shot. And then some of these other features are very small: static anonymous functions, covariant return types, that type of thing. I might do a third video. Let me know if you want a third video on those things or not. We have for each loops, a couple new features for each loops, lambda discard parameters, and so on and so forth. So let me know if you want a video for those. Otherwise, this will probably be the last one I do for C# 9. Again, I did records and init-only setters last time. I think those are the two biggest things. But pattern matching is definitely something I'm looking forward to, and I will definitely be using a lot. So I am very excited to cover that. Let's see what else. Oh yeah, definitely check out my Thursday stream. I think we're gonna go start doing some Blazor, just general Blazor tips, because I notice there's a lot of people that are really interested in Blazor right now, and it's something that we use all the time. So I'm gonna start up a series on Blazor tips, and I think that's it. Let's get into it. So today we're gonna go over top-level statements and pattern matching enhancements, and like I said, targeted type new expressions and targeted type conditional expressions. So let's go ahead. This link that I'm going off of is in the documentation, or in the description of the video, so feel free to check that out. Alright, so I just have a blank two projects over here, one for C# 8 and one for C# 9, and we're going to kind of compare the difference between the two. So with C# 8, let's create a new. I started from completely blank, so all we have is the project. Let's go ahead and create a new class, and I'm going to call it program.cs. So normally with C# 8, you're going to have to create a main method for your program. When you create a brand new solution and a brand new project, it will create one for you, but if for some reason you started with a blank project, or you're not using Visual Studio or something like that, you may have to create the main method yourself. So how you would do that is you would have your namespace. I guess you don't necessarily need a namespace, but you probably want one. And then you're going to put the name of the class that is driving the program. In this case, it's just program. So I'm going to have to call it public static so that we have access to it from the, so the project has access to the main function. And we do a public static void main. And that's it. Now we can go ahead and do something in our program. Write out hello world, for example. And now this will work just fine. Well, maybe not. Let's see. What did I miss? Program does not contain a static main method or for a suitable entry point. Yeah, it does. Oh, I have C# 9 as my starter project. That would do it. So C# 8 is the one we want. So over here we have the console displaying hello world. So that's how you got to do it in C# 8. That's been standard since the very beginning. We have a main function, and if we go ahead and try to create another file in here, let's say program2, and we also make that a static class with a public static void main, and we write out something else. Let's do something else. Well, which one is going to get called? The one from program or program2? Let's find out. And in fact, it does not even build. It says that you cannot have more than one entry point. So that makes sense, right? We don't want to have more than one main function in our program. So that's what we had to deal with in C#8. That's not a problem. We'll delete that one. So in C#9, they're allowing you to basically skip a good bunch of this entry code. Because if you think about it, this is quite a lot of code just for writing out hello world. Again, that error will go away, I think, when we run it. I deleted the other file. Let's go ahead and run it now. Okay, yeah, it's gone. So that's kind of a lot of code, especially for new people to C# or new programmers in general. That's kind of a lot of code to just write out something to the console. So that's why in C#9 you no longer have to do this. So if I create a C#9 file, I'll just create a blank file here. We'll add a class, and I'm gonna just get rid of all this. You can actually just do system.console.writeLine hello world, and that's it. Let's go ahead and run that, and there we go. So it's kind of interesting. I don't know exactly what I think of it yet. I think it's good for beginners, and I think I'll just leave it at that, because some of these features, how to have a class, how to have a function, it is overwhelming for a beginner. I can understand that, but in the underlying what's going on here is it's auto-generated, those functions and classes. And in fact, it's going to start looking a little bit complicated if you start having a bunch of namespaces that you're using. Maybe you're using system, maybe you're using system.link, and you have a whole bunch of these types of things. Then you have random code just kind of underneath it, and then you have maybe even some classes. Class person with a name. And if I go ahead and put, let's say I put all this code in here. It's kind of confusing what code is actually getting run here. It maybe not for you, but for me it is. We have code here getting run, and then we have a class defined underneath it. But this will actually work just fine. So if I run it like I did before, we see hello world again. So it works just fine. I don't know, personal preference. I wouldn't use it other than just teaching somebody, or maybe you want to do some scripting, some practice, just kind of setting some things up, and you don't want to have to worry about the main function there. But otherwise, it gets a little bit confusing, especially if you don't call it program.cs. Otherwise, in C#8, you had to look for static void main. It was a little bit more obvious than just random bits of code underneath the using statements. So that's my personal thoughts on that. Let me know what you think, if top level entry points are going to be a useful thing for you, or if you think maybe it's just useful for beginners or whatnot. But I definitely think there is a use case for beginners. That is for sure. Other than that, I don't think there is much. So I'm gonna go ahead and just put the static void main back in, just for my own peace of mind, and call this C#9. Okay, moving forward to pattern matching enhancements. Oh, there's one more thing I did want to touch on with the top level statements though, and that just like in C#8, how you couldn't have two files with static void main, you can't have two files that have just code in them. So if I go ahead and create another file here, maybe program2.cs, if I get rid of all that, I can't have another program that is, a top level statement. We'll see here we got a compiler error. Only one compilation unit can have a top level statements. So that's what it's complaining about. Same exact error that we got if we had two static void main functions in C#8. So that is that. All right, let's move back to, let's go ahead and I'm just going to copy this again. So we're going back to C#9, and we're putting in the static void main, just because I'm used to that. I'm sure you're probably used to that as well. Let's go ahead and look at the next one. Pattern matching enhancements. So type patterns match a variable, or type patterns match a variable is a type. So let's see what, I'm not quite sure what that even means, but parenthesized patterns, conjunctive patterns, disjunctive patterns. Let's go ahead and just kind of cover some of those real quick. So in C# 8 or 7, one of those, we were introduced to the switch expression. So if you haven't seen that, I'll explain that real briefly. So let's just say we have a string shape name, and we'll set that equal to square, I guess. So here we'll do number of sides. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a switch expression on the shape name. So it looks kind of like this. You put the name of the variable first, and then switch, and then you can put in your different cases here. So if I put rectangle, that has 4 sides. If I have circle, that has 0 sides. If I put triangle, that's got 3 sides, and so on. Now, we're getting an error here. The switch expression does not handle all possible values. This is just a warning, but we can put in a discard, which will catch everything else, and we'll just put 0, I guess, for that. And this is standard. This is nothing new. But what is new is that before you had to match exactly. Otherwise, you had to do a little bit of extra work to get it there. So before, let's just try a number example, for example. Well, yeah, let's try a number example. That's kind of what the switch expression was. But let's go ahead and try something with like a toll booth. So if I have, let's just kind of set this up. So from midnight to 6 a.m., we're going to charge $1 to come through our toll booth because there's not a lot of traffic there. We want to encourage that. From 6 to 9 a.m., we're going to charge $3 because that's kind of rush hour, and we don't want to encourage people to come through and bog down our streets. And from 9 a.m. to maybe 4 p.m., we'll just charge $2. And from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., we'll charge $3. And after 6, we'll charge $1 again. And that's probably not exactly how you would do it, but you get the idea, right? So let's go ahead and set up a date time. Well, we don't even need a date time. Let's just do hour. So int hour, this is hour of the day. Maybe we'll say 4. That's 4 a.m. So we want our cost now. So we'll set up a decimal. I guess it could be an int. Doesn't matter. Int cost equals our switch. Again, there's that switch expression. You put the variable first and then switch. So let's go ahead and do it where we do if the hour is less than 6, we return 1. And for now, let's just do everything else as 2, just so you can kind of see it actually does work. In C# 8, this did not work. Let's go ahead and copy this. Well, let's run it first just so you can see that it actually does work. Console.WriteLine cost. So we should get, since our hour is 4, we should get 1 here. And there it is. So that worked just fine. But this code in C# 8 does not work. Let's go ahead and copy that over to C# 8. And if you've done these, if you've tried to do this in C# 8 before, you'll realize exactly why. And that is because you couldn't do relational patterns. And this is something new for C# 9. So with C# 9, we get relational patterns. So if it's less than 6, we're going to return 1. If it's greater than 6, greater than or equal to 6 and less than 9. I'll do it like this first just so you can see. And less than 9, we're going to return 3. If it goes from 9, greater than or equal to 9, and less than 4, we're going to return 2. Greater than, sorry, not 4. This is 24-hour time, not AM, PM. Okay, less than or greater than or equal to 16, and less than, let's see, what would that be? 18. We're going to return 3, and everything else will return 1. So that kind of matches what we have up here. Now, obviously, we have a lot of errors here, and the reason is because normally in C# you use the and sign, but for expressions we're using the and operator. So this is kind of a new thing, and that was talked about right here, this conjunctive and pattern. We have this or as well, that corresponds to an or. But yeah, so I don't exactly know why they did that, to be honest. I would have probably preferred the double ampersand here, but I guess that shows that this is an expression and not something else. So this will work just fine. Relational check here, less than 6, greater than or equal to 6, and less than 9, and so on and so forth. So this is really powerful. Otherwise it would have been a lot of if statements, and a lot of else statements. So definitely I would recommend using a switch expression. But these types of expressions don't have to be used in switch expressions. They can be used anywhere. So if you're like me, when you first started off programming, you probably wanted to do something like this. If hour is greater than 3 and not like the and less than 5, do something. And if you're like me, you noticed fairly early on that you have to put this twice, and it's kind of inconvenient. But that all has finally changed with pattern matching. We can do and, that keyword, but we got to put is in front of it. So if hour is greater than 3 and less than 5, if you notice, it looks a little bit more English-like than normal C#, for better or for worse. So I guess your own opinion on that, but that's how it is. So this is signifies it's a pattern, and then we can put in our pattern here. So no longer do we have to put the same variable twice, which can save us a good amount of writing, especially if we have multiple things. So we could do is greater than 3 and less than 5, and I guess there's not really anything else you could do here. But maybe if we did something different, let's go ahead and set up a string, I guess. So string name equals Bob. So if name, whoops, we already have if name is not, again, this is the not expression. So that's another new one. So if name is not Tom and not Joe and not Carol, then we do something. And this is going to look kind of weird for a lot of people, but this is perfectly valid code in C# 9. So maybe that's a good thing for you. I actually kind of like it. I wish that it would have just been like the standard operators, and like the not sign, but I'm sure they had the reasons for it. It's probably just so that we can see clearly that it's a pattern and not a standard comparison, because we don't have to write out name multiple times. So that is something that you can use, and I will be using quite a bit. I'll be using this relational thing all the time. I know that for sure. In addition to that, you can put things in parentheses. So maybe you want to do this, and in parentheses you might want to do name and and name is Bob. I don't know. And we're gonna get an error here because looks like I didn't format that correctly. So I think what I did wrong was this should be in like a parenthesis, and maybe this would be or. And it's starting to get really kind of confusing when you start putting all these, at least for me, when you start putting all these ors, nots, ands. For me, just looking at a standard not sign or an or, like a double pipe, is easier to understand, but I guess you wouldn't normally code this way anyways. But yeah, you can use or, you can use not, you can use and, you can put parentheses around things. Pattern matching in C# 8 is finally kind of caught up to what we had in F#. So definitely take use of these things. And again, none of this was possible in C# 8. If I just kind of copy this over, it's gonna say, you know, what are you talking about here? None of this makes sense. So that is pattern matching with C# 8. And type patterns, I didn't cover that one. I don't know exactly what that means. So I'll look into that, and maybe I'll write a comment in here and see if we can figure that out. Oh, I did want to say one more thing about pattern matching, and it goes back to what we talked about in the last video with records. It doesn't have to be records, but it can be anything else, really. So let's go ahead and just delete some of this stuff. Start over. So if I have a public record shape, and it has a int width and an int height. So if you did watch the last one, you'll know what a record is. It's kind of like a class, but a little bit different. And it's got this positional constructor. So it's got two properties, width and height. And the constructor is the width and height. And actually with this constructor, it gives us deconstructor functionality as well, which is great. So if I create a shape equals new shape, maybe 500 by 100. I don't know what kind of units that is. Maybe that's pixels. I don't know. But it doesn't matter. So now I can destructure that as well if I do var width height equals shape. That's going to deconstruct this shape into variables that I can then use, you know, if width greater than 500, you know, do something, right? So that is records at a very, very quick thing. There's more to records. I definitely recommend you check out the other video that I did on them. But records in general are going to be great for pattern matching, because what you can do is, let's say, okay, I created a shape, and maybe I want to do something depending on what that shape looks like. Maybe I want to give it some kind of classification. So I'm just going to go ahead and create an enum shape classification, and we'll give it wide, tall, and other. I don't know. I guess that's fine. So if we do shape classification here and we get a local variable or a variable for it, we can do a switch expression on this shape, on the entire shape object, not just an integer or something like that. So if we do something like this, in the switch expression we have the entire object now. So because we can deconstruct it, we can actually put in parentheses what we kind of want for this. So maybe we want where the width is greater than 100, and we don't really care what the height is. Those types of shapes are going to be classified as wide shapes. And that looks kind of weird, but just think about it in terms of destructuring or deconstructing. I don't know why I keep calling it that. We have a shape, and we're deconstructing it into two variables, and we're checking to see if the first one is greater than 100, and we're checking to see if the next one, we don't really care what the next one is. If that is true, it's going to be wide. Maybe we have another one where we're checking to see if the height of it is greater than 100. And in that case, it's going to be tall. Otherwise, it's going to be other. And this is a very interesting way of doing expressions. Now we have relational expressions inside of a deconstructed object. So all of these things are available to you, and I definitely recommend that you do them. Now there are other ways to use these types of things. I can see if I can find a good link. In this particular link, there's nothing really that talks about it, but other ways that you could do it. So let's go ahead and get rid of this. I guess what I'm trying to get at is there's other ways that you can do expressions based off of the shapes. So this is one way, and there's plenty of other ways to do it as well. So if, for example, we have a record called a triangle, and it inherits from shape, and we'll give it a width and a height. Whoops. Shape. Okay. So that's kind of weird, but whatever. I guess I've never done a record like that before. So anyways, we have a shape, and now we have a triangle, and we'll give that a height of 300 and a width. So we can, maybe this is actually, I know I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but maybe this is what they were talking about when they were talking about type patterns, because now I can just say triangle, and I can give it a classification. That's probably what they were talking about now that I'm really thinking about it. Otherwise, you give it a classification of other. So anyways, there's lots of different ways to do pattern matching on these things, and now with C# 9 we can do them relationally, and we can combine them with and or and not, and put them in parentheses. Whole bunch of different things we can do. So really, I highly recommend, if you haven't learned about pattern matching yet, do so, especially some of the things that came out with C# 7 and 8, because you can combine them with what is in C# 9. Anyways, that was a lot to cover about pattern matching. Let's move on. So one other thing I wanted to talk about was the targeted type new expressions, and that can be very useful. So let's say I have, I want to create a variable here. So I have a dictionary, let's say, of string and shape, and I'm calling it shape dictionary. And I set it equal to new dictionary string shape. That's fine. A lot of people will do var here because it makes it shorter. And I would agree, that does make it shorter, and it does give it some more clarity. However, I actually prefer seeing this because I know at a glance what type it is. I don't have to hover over it or use it in some kind of way to know what type it is. A lot of times too, you're not going to initialize the variable right away. You're going to maybe set it to something, and then you're going to do some code, and then you're going to come back and set it equal to something. Right? That's a very common practice. So in this case, you can't do var because it doesn't know what type it's supposed to be. And in fact, you're going to get a compile error. So I would actually recommend going forward, and I don't know if everybody will do this as well, but going forward, I would recommend putting the type first, and then when you instantiate the object, you use the new C#8 targeted type new expressions, which means you don't have to put the type anymore. If the compiler knows what the type is, you can just say new and then parentheses, and that's it. So I could combine that all into this one line, and it would be fine. And now I can go ahead and use my dictionary just like I normally would. I can add a square, and I can put a new square like that. Another cool thing about it too is you could declare it and initialize it as well. So we could do, let's see. Well, this is a dictionary. Let's go ahead and do a list just so it's a little bit more clear as far as what we're doing. So a list of shape, maybe. Shapes equals new, and and IntelliSense still will suggest this, so that's kind of annoying. But let's go ahead and just create a new list of shapes that way. So again, I'm not putting the type. So now when I go in and try and add something to my shapes list, I can just put it in right now. Just like this. And I'm going to give these different values. And there you go. We have a shapes list where we're using this new keyword. It's not a new keyword, but a new way to use the keyword where we're not putting the type. And that's because the compiler already knows the type. But it actually gets better than that because it knows everything in here needs to be a shape, right? It's a list of shapes. So we don't even need to put shape here. It knows that that thing that we're creating is going to be a shape. So we just say new and put the parameters in there. Now, at first glance, this might not seem that useful, but a lot of times in code, especially if you've worked on larger projects, you know that class names can be very, very long. And especially when we start using generics and passing in, lists of things and dictionaries of things, you may have a very long class name or a very long type. So being able to omit that might make your code clearer. Now, I will say that there's a caveat with this though, and that is if for some reason, like let's say we don't have it initialized here, maybe we have some code and then we initialize it down here. It's not exactly clear without kind of looking at this what is actually being put in here. And that kind of goes back to the whole var thing that I was talking about before. When you use var, it's not always clear what you're trying to do. Especially when you're looking at it later. So I would recommend using this new thing, this new targeted type constructor or initializer thing, whatever they call it. I'd recommend using it, but just make sure that you kind of think about clarity of code too. To me, just because I've done C# for so long, this looks like a tuple. It looks like I'm initializing a tuple, which is kind of odd. And in fact, I'm initializing a shape. So I'm going to use this. I've already used it in some of my programs, but sparingly. I'm doing it sparingly at first until I get used to it, and we'll see. We'll see what other people think about it. But I like it, especially when we're talking about passing in something into a function. So if we have, like, let's say public void do something, and it's expecting a triangle. Well, this has to be static because I'm in a static class. Now if I want to do something and I don't have a triangle yet, I'd have to do new triangle and then give it a width and height, right? Something like that. But in fact, you don't need to put that anymore. So It's just the syntax. If the syntax looks good to you like that, I would recommend using it. Otherwise, don't. It's not going to give you any new functionality. It's just for clarity. But if it makes it more unclear, then don't do it. So I will use it sparingly, at least for now. All right, last thing is that I wanted to cover is the targeted type conditional expressions. And this one always drove me crazy in C# 8, and I'm glad it's fixed. So if I'm going to the C# 8 program right now, and I'm going to create a function called public int convert number, and I'm going to take in a number. And this function, what I want to do, actually, I'm going to return an int question mark, a nullable integer. So if the number passed in is greater than 5, I'm going to return null. Otherwise, I'm just going to return return the number that was passed in. And it sounds a little funky. Why would you do this? You wouldn't, but I'm doing it for an example of how you can use this. So normally what you'd have to do is you'd say return number greater than 5. If it is, you're going to return null. Otherwise, you're going to return number. This is using the tertiary or the ternary operator. And then we can call convert number, passing in a number. And we're getting all kinds of errors. Well, this one is because it's not static. But we're getting all kinds of errors down here, and it's saying, we can't do that. Feature targeted type conditional expression is not available in C# 8. Please use language 9. And what that is saying is because this type, null, does not equal this type, which is int. And it doesn't realize that what I'm trying to do is return a nullable int, so it should just be able to convert them both to a nullable int. So if you wanted to do that, you'd have to cast this as an int question mark, and there you go. That's how you would do it in C# 8. And I've had to do that a lot, especially when dealing with database calls for some reason. I don't know if you've ever done database calls where you have to do something like if something, then do db null or something, db null dot value, and otherwise, do something else. So in this case, or in that case, I would have to convert it to a type, but in this case, I don't. I can, well, let me back up. This is fixed in C# 9. So I can take this, and I can take the same exact code, and let's take this, literally the same exact code, put it in C# 9, and now I can take this out. I don't need to worry about converting null to an int question mark. It can tell that both of these things are can be converted to the same type, and that type is int question mark. So that is that, and I'm going to use that a lot. I hope you find some uses for that. It's not a big deal. You just had to cast it before, but why put that in when it was pretty obvious what I was trying to do? So a lot of these things down here, especially, are going to be the syntactic sugar type things like what I just showed you. It doesn't really add necessarily any features to the language, but it makes it a little bit clearer as far as what you're trying to do. So I definitely encourage you. You're not going to really use this. It's just going to work now instead of having to cast it before. So I think that's all the things I want to cover today. Definitely let me know if you want me to cover these bottom ones, because I didn't get to those. If we see value in that, I'll go ahead and do that. Otherwise, like I said earlier, I'm going to start a Blazor tips kind of series, in which case I go over some things going with Blazor and what's new in Blazor and how you can use certain things. So I hope you enjoyed this. Hopefully I didn't go too fast or bounce around too much, but definitely leave some feedback if you liked it, and leave a like and go ahead and subscribe. All right, thanks.